Welcome. You're tuned in to the We Are All Artists podcast, a space where we talk about living life as a conscious creative. I'm your host, Adriana Douglas. Our intention is to support you throughout the process of discovering your inner artist and transforming from the inside out. Here in this space, we believe that the way out is through. On the other side is a world with more art, more beauty, and access to more of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. And now let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to another interview episode of the We Are All Artists podcast. Happy Wednesday to you if you're listening on release day. And otherwise, I hope you all have had a wonderful week wherever in the world you are listening from. We are well underway over here at the We Are All Artists podcast with episodes in season 1. We have just released our 20th episode last week, this one being number 21, and I'll be rounding out the first season in the next month or two with a handful of additional episodes, which I cannot wait for you all to hear. So with that being said, I would love to hear what you'd like to know more of, who you'd like to hear from, and overall what you've enjoyed so far on this journey with me. So thank you so much for listening, and I cannot wait for you to hear today's guest episode. On today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Jen Liss. Jen is on a mission to educate and inspire more people to untether from societal expectations so they can shine into a more joyful, authentic, and abundant life. Known for her straightforward and honest coaching style, she makes self-development work relatable and fun. Jen is a firm believer in radical self-acceptance and nervous system regulation as a path to greater joy, which she helps people to attain through breathwork. Jen has been honored to speak on stage both locally and internationally, sharing her message to inspire more people to live an authentically joyful life. Her podcast, Untethered with Jen Liss, is in the top 2.5% of all podcasts, encouraging thousands of listeners to align with their truth and go for their dreams. When not out inspiring others to live authentically, you'll find Jen frolicking on hiking trails in Portland, Oregon, where she currently resides with her husband and podcast producer, Joey. In today's episode, Jen and I dive into the power of community, decision-making, and trusting your inner guidance. We also talk about Jen's offerings, including her breathwork membership and her podcast, Untethered with Jen Liss. I absolutely hope that you will go check out her resources, join her breathwork membership, and tune into her podcast and feel inspired to unleash your inner brilliance. Hi, Jen. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
It's so good to have you. I'm so excited to learn all about your journey, and I think we could just dive right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
One of the things that I've noticed is your Instagram handle was called Untethered Jen. And untethering is, and I never put 2 and 2 together. I was like, oh, Untethered Jen, cool. But I never put 2 and 2 together of like what that might mean. And I would love for you to unpack that with me a little bit of what untethering mean to the audience or to you.
Yeah. So I'm discovering what being untethered means moment by moment, day by day. I'm a breath worker, so I also say breath by breath. I'm learning what that really means to me. But essentially, untethering is becoming less of who you thought you were so that you can be more of who you truly are. So that can mean listening to our ego less. That can mean unlearning all of the things that we thought we should be doing, all of the pleasing, all of the approval strategies that we have to help others, seeing ourselves through other people's eyes, all of those things, letting go of that so that you can be your most true and authentic self. And I think that's a lifelong discovery. And it's pretty fun.
It sounds like it allows for surprise to come through because it's lifelong, and every time you untether one thing or one moment, then over here, up over here, as you're like, oh, here's this new thing that also wants to be untethered. It's almost like each part is like, wait, me too.
Yeah. You just helped me to see something that is really fun that I want to incorporate into my life wherever I can. I love surprise and delight.
Yes.
And there are scientific things that are happening in our brain when we are surprised and delighted that are really good for your creativity. And so, looking at life through that lens of I'm constantly untethering what's around the corner can be so much more fun than I need this to happen so that I can. So there's a whole different shift in perspective that has happened for me since taking this more I'm untethering. That is my perspective, as opposed to I need to get to here. I think you and I can relate a lot on that striving, achieving kind of mindset. That's what I had for most of my life. And I came to a point where I realized this isn't getting it for me. And what else is there? There's got to be something else to life than achieving and striving and proving.
Once that question starts percolating, the what else is there, that is not only untethering, like unraveling. All of a sudden, like all of a sudden you realize you know nothing. You're like, what is this universe? Where are we? Why are we here? What are we doing? And so I really appreciate that you're also sharing surprise and delight in something that you are like actively like, I want this in my life. Because I wonder why there are folks that might feel like a little threatened by a surprise or synchronicity or delight. Like, why could that be so tough for us to actually open up to and receive?
Oh, because we want control, because it's terrifying. I'm like, oh, it's so much fun to be curious and to have surprise and delight around every bend. But no, the ego is not okay with that. Most we want control, we want safety. There is a lack of safety in being surprised and delighted of not knowing what's coming at you. If you don't have bodily embodied safety in your beingness, that feels freaking terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. So no way in hell would I think that that sounds fun or awesome if I don't have a sense of embodied safety. And that was very much me a few years ago. And I've realized through this journey, what I really needed was to come back home to myself so that I could feel like it's curious and it's fun and I get to see what's around the bend instead of being terrified that something's going to pop out around the bend. I love horror movies, but I really don't want to live my life terrified that a clown's going to pop out around every corner, which is how most of us are living our lives.
I remember a moment, like exactly what you're describing about embodying the safety. I remember a moment, it was about 3 years ago, and I was getting out of my car going somewhere. And I remember it was one of the first times I was so confused mentally because I kept like feeling, I was like, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And this had never happened before. Like, I think I lived my life, as you said, like probably living that way my entire life, but I didn't have the mind body connection. And I remember it was like, I don't know, my body just like turned on and it was like, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. And I didn't know what to do in that moment. I was like, there's no threats around me. You're like observing the environment. You're like, there's no actual threat. I'm actually fine. But my body was like, we can't go there. We don't, like, this is not cool. And I didn't even know how to listen to it. I was like, I don't know what to do with this information that you've just given me, body. Like we've been working from here the whole time. So, um, what has supported you in getting some of that embodied safety that we could all use more of?
Oh, breath work. It's why I am a breath worker. It's why I created a business around it. It has been so paramount to my journey. And also meditation, Reiki, like all of the energetic practices, any embodiment practice that
Yeah.
helps you to feel back into your body. I'm passionate about all of them. But for me, breath work through and through.
What kind of breath work do you facilitate or do or use?
Yeah, I facilitate trauma informed meditative breath work primarily. I also work with simple breaths, helping people, supporting people with, learning to breathe again. I've got a couple of clients who have long COVID. I support people with that. Primarily, what I love to do is exactly what we're talking about, helping people to ground back into what a sense of embodied safety means so that we can untether. We can't untether without safety. And
Right.
so, yeah, we can go as deep as you want into how
Yeah.
that happens with breath work.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we can't untether until we have the safety. And so, if I could go back and do it all over again, like starting the healing journey, I think I started a lot more with mindset, which is fabulous, but it didn't get me the safety. It was like I skipped a step, you know? So once I started discovering breath work and being able to pull it out in in those moments, it was something that allowed me to really ground in, as you're saying. But something I also noticed was that I had to slow down. Like it was too much too fast for me. So like, yeah, I would love to go into the breath work a little bit more of like what it looks like to also respect and honor your nervous system and your body's needs. Cause like I didn't know I had to slow down. So I'd go do these like intense breathwork sessions and then I'd be like frazzled because I didn't have that foundation that I think I didn't know I was looking for, but I definitely needed.
Yeah, this is two important things. So I will talk about the mindset thing first. Most
Yeah.
of us start with mindset, and that's okay. That's where most of the world is operating from the
Right.
space of the mind. So that is our natural entry point for anyone. Very few people are like, I'm going to go get into my body. Like, we don't even know what the F that means.
No, we
So
don't.
why would we enter from there? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like
Right.
seeing the mystery. There's these breweries here in Portland that have mystery doors, and you
Okay.
don't even know that the mystery doors are there unless somebody has told you. And then once you know that there's a blue light that shows you the mystery door, then it's very easy. Every time you walk into a McMenamins, you know to go look for the blue light. There's the mystery door, go in.
Yeah.
That's what we know now about embodiment. But we were completely clueless. We didn't see
Right.
somebody go in through a random mystery door when we were walking through the brewery. You know what I mean? It's like, once you do, you're like, oh, what's that door? What's happening? There's something fun in here. So that is mindset versus embodiment. And then when we talk about, you can re-traumatize, we can re-traumatize ourselves over and over and over. And surprisingly, it can actually feel really good. We're just going in and we're like blowing ourselves out and we're blowing our minds. And it's like, and this just feels so good over and over and over because you're triggering yourself and you're like feeling
Right.
good afterward. And then you're triggering,
Right.
it's like a fight with your significant other.
Yeah.
And you're just doing it over and over again. And that can happen with healing modalities, not on purpose,
Yeah.
but it can happen if we're not aware of our threshold. And so what you're speaking to, which is so important, is really starting to understand it's okay if you blow that out and then coming, but it's like once you know better, do better and
Yes.
realize maybe that was too much. Let me take it back. What we call it in as breathwork facilitators, we'll call it titration, taking things in little tiny sips. And it's why in my breathwork offering, I offer a membership where it's like, come and be here in the breath with me multiple times a week for multiple months on end, because I want you to feel safe titrating. I don't want you to feel like you have to come in and like get this wham, bam, thank you,
Right.
ma'am. You might, but it would be better and best if you can just like come in and take a little sip and see what happens to your nervous system, and then take another little sip and watch what happens to your nervous system.
I love that. And I think that I'm thinking about what you mentioned about the brewery and the doors. And like that's, yeah, mindset's kind of like the door, right? That we go through. I also feel like just using the door metaphor or analogy is that sometimes I think I would blindly walk through these doors of these healing doors because once you know, first of all, that healing's available, and then you also know that there are all these modalities, like we are talking about a little bit. I wanted to go explore them all. So it was like going through all the magic doors. And sometimes though, like I think, and I don't know, maybe this has just been on my mind lately, is like not all of them are supposed to work for you. And I really like, I think my ego took a hit when I was like, why isn't that working? Like that one, they all should work, you know? And some of them didn't. And sometimes it was going through the door and it was like a horror movie. Like we're also said a horror movie thing. It was like some doors were like scary movies and some doors were like Disney movies and some doors were like, I don't know, Wonka or something. So like it really depended. And so I also, and that goes back to the safety where like I feel like with more embodied safety, you can make that informed decision to be like, oh, I'm gonna actually walk back out and go through a new door versus feeling like you have to stick with it. Because I feel like some people will say, hey, that thing didn't work for me. And then they stop. Like they stop there because like, oh, meditation didn't work, or like that breath work wasn't for me. And then they're like, they don't continue on the journey. So it's like, how do we get more people to keep going on the journey? It's lifelong. It's like, how do we get more people to join us on this train?
Well, that's the question. That's the ever-growing question. And of course, part of it is the society that we live in, and the way that we hook the human brain is that we have to sell everything, or we feel like we have to sell everything as the thing that is going to help you. And what selling things as the thing that is going to help you does to people is that it creates judgment of self when it doesn't work for us. And so there's this unintended consequence of some of the marketing that we do in this world. And I don't fully know what the solution to that is, but I'm trying ways, just radical honesty, and trying to come at it from this place of being really authentic. But part of it is that. And so judgment comes in. We have so much judgment. We have so much shame. And if you aren't aware that that's what's happening in your mind and your body when you have an experience, then your brain is it's going to say that to you. So it's like, have compassion for yourself when you notice that, and just keep following the breadcrumbs. That's all I can tell anybody, is continue to follow the breadcrumbs and continue to release judgment at every corner, because that judgment isn't serving you beyond you gaining some kind of information from it. Like, oh, okay, what is here for me from that? And that's what I feel like breathwork helps me more than anything, to separate viscerally. I can viscerally separate from what is actually me, that magical light beam that I truly am, that energetic source, that the soul, the heart, the whatever you want to call it, the God part of myself. I can feel the difference between the swell of emotion that is what the ego is running through my body versus what I truly am. And if you've never felt that before, how could you possibly separate the judgment and the ego and all of those things from what you truly are? So it's a felt thing, and we're feeling creatures, but a lot of us have numbed out.
Yeah, two things that come up for me as you say that. One is that sounds a little bit too like that concept of turning on the witness a little bit, like at least to see both of those. And then the other thing that I was thinking about was following the breadcrumbs. That's sort of like where the creative journey turned on for me. Because like following the breadcrumbs is that uh creative journey into the unknown of like what's next. Like and you get to create or co-create that next step that then leads to the next step. And then you start to design it and dance around it. And like if you don't like something, you get to change it. So we can kind of go in two directions. One, I think that witness part is really important because, and I think different modalities talk about it similarly, but like the witness, the higher self, that moment where you can, I was gonna say sort of for me, it's like balancing. For me, it's a balancing act between the higher self and the ego. Like that's where I am right now in my journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if the witness resonates with you.
Yeah, the witness resonates with me more than higher self. I use both because I know that people connect with one over the other. I'm personally a fan of dismantling hierarchy in every way that we can, even
All
in
right.
terms of high vibe, higher self, that is
Yeah.
automatically putting something better than the other. And I think the ego is really important, and who you really are is really important. The ego is helping you navigate this planet. The ego is here to help you communicate with other people here on the planet and to move about this world that we have created. So they're both incredibly important. So that's my perspective. I think the witness is the watcher. That's what you are. You're watching all of this happen. Depending what you believe and what what your belief system is, but mine is that we came here to have an experience. We came to this earth to experience, to change things, to shift things, to maybe all of us came with some different reason. Maybe mine and yours is probably to help do some like shifting and changing of things because we're in this active space. Other people are just here to come and have some fun. We're all here for different things.
Something that you just said, I totally think we should dive into when you said the dismantling the hierarchy. And I say that because I've been on a journey of creating music, and something that happened to me, like, and this must be, maybe it's spiritual, I'll say like spirituality, on the internet or whatever. I started to feel like some of the music wasn't high vibe enough. And I could see how it was, for lack of a better word, fucking with a mind fuck. Because I was like, how could I now not feel like proud of this creation? Because it's like not, I don't know. It was like, it's human. Music makes us all human. It talks about the human experience, this full range of emotions. And I could feel this judgment, this voice that's like, it's not high vibe. And I'm like, but that's the point. I've been really working with this lately with and untethering this belief of like, why does it have to be high vibe? Like, why can't it just be what it is? So I would love to talk about that hierarchy perspective, because I bet you some artists feel that way of like, what I just created, like, is it, you could say, is it good enough? Is it this enough? Is it that enough? But the hierarchy, and it's a real thing.
Yeah, it is a real thing. I mean, and that comes I mean, there's the spiritual bypassing, there's spiritual shame, there's spiritual guilt. It all exists at every level because at every level, there are humans with egos who are creating these things. And when we become unaware of that ego, we end up creating feelings within the structure of it, which you are currently feeling. There is a culture in the healing community that is a shame culture that does exist. It exists within everything. Where it's so powerful is that you noticed it. You said,
Mm,
what's
yes.
happening here?
What's happening? It, I, I'm so glad that like you know it, because I didn't know. I didn't know. I had no idea that the spiritual shame was like a thing. And is it almost like, is the point to just notice it, as you said? Or do we want to dismantle it? Because at some point you're like, I don't want the world to be this way. I want this to stop. So now I want to like go change like spiritual shame. But then I'm like, maybe that's not a part of my mission. Like what's now we get into the rabbit hole of like, is that part of my mission to like try to dismantle this or
That's
just
where it gets
notice it
juicy.
and move
That's
on?
Yeah, that's where it
Yeah.
gets juicy. And I think where we can be surprised and delighted and experiment. If we treat the world as an experiment and you say, what if that is part of my journey? What if I talk about this a little bit in this conversation with Jen and we'll see where this goes and we'll see if it lights a spark in me and see if there's something here for me in this experience, or is it simply for you to be somehow bringing that into your music in some way? It's like every conversation we have every day, there is something new for us that is layering this for us, and it's helping us. It's like a layering on and then a dismantling back down and a layering on. And that is what I look at as the untethering. It's like we're always getting new layers and then we're pulling them back down and looking at what's new. And what a beautiful creative process that we're all engaging in all day, every day.
I never thought about it, about the putting the layers on, because I've always been of the mindset of peeling the layers back, like getting the onion to the core. But it sounds like there's also a layering up again and then going back down. Is that what I'm hearing? Am I getting it?
It's so funny because we're almost like hierarchying this again.
I know. Oops.
We're learning new things all day, every day, you know, for every onion like layer that you peel down, it's like there's a new one. And where does that new one come from? I don't know if it's just like going down to the core or if
Yeah.
it's like a new one that comes
Yes.
into the periph, you know, it's like,
Yeah, like it sprouts. Grow. It's
like onion
well, it
petals
sprouts
just
new.
flying around.
It's well, I guess it's because you grow and you see it from a new perspective, and then you're like,
Yeah.
maybe that layer wasn't as deep as I thought it was, or oh, that slice has got 10 more, slices like that it just got cut up into. So I I find it fascinating that like for those listening, like this is really sometimes what it's like is just having a conversation like this where you start to even understand one of these topics and then as you mentioned like decide, oh, do I want to go explore that for a longer period of time, or did I just need that little bit of information from Jen today to just kind of uh sit with and then go create something else, and you never know. And sometimes it's happened to me where the information, sometimes it's not even like relevant until like a year later or 2 years later. Has that happened to you where like you learn something like way back and then it finally clicks later? That's the whole it's not linear thing.
It's nonlinear. We want things to be linear because that's the way the mind works in a linear way, but you don't necessarily work in a linear way. Energy doesn't work in a linear way. It's completely non-local. It's completely non-linear, but the mind that is most of the time in control. So when you can come back and accept more of what and who you are and accept more of the information that your body is receiving via energetic transmissions, you start to be able to dismantle that desire for things to be so linear. And yes, things are coming in all the time. You know, my own journey, this makes me think of just my own journey. I started a podcast a few years ago. It's called The Creative Commute. I see a lot of myself in you and your podcast journey as you're stepping into this
Yeah.
space. It began as an exploration of creativity, speaking to creatives, helping people be more creative. I was exploring, what does it mean to be creative? What does creativity even mean? What does it mean to people who are out there being creative? And I did this exploration. And what I came to realize, you said this right before we hopped on the podcast,
Yeah.
creativity is spiritual.
Yes.
And that aha for me changed everything. It changed everything. But what I have always called this, and I still prescribe to this, even with the untethering and all that bit that we're talking about, I always called it a creative commute. That was what my podcast was called. Okay. We are gaining new things all along the way. And all of those new things that you are gaining all the time are making you into the creative being that you are today. Like the creative person that I was yesterday is different than today because you've gained more. You have access to different energy. You have access to different thoughts and new ideas and new experiences. So we are moving and shifting all the time. But what's different from like a traditional commute is that it's not just from here to A to B. It's like A to B to C to D all at the same time. And we can't quite like comprehend that in the brain.
I had no idea about your old podcast name, and that's so cool because you said it so eloquently. Like it's the whole creativity is spiritual, and once you come to that conclusion, then it opens up this whole world of what I want to create next and what resources do I have? And resources don't have to be like like physical in form, or they don't have to be like material things. Like resources could just be like your breath. Like you said, like what resources do I have to be more creative, problem solve, um, drive to school, taking the commute part literally, drive a different route to be inspired. Um, you know, I even with over the holiday season played around with Elf on the Shelf just because I was like, I want to like see what this is like to see if this supports me with my ideas for something else. Like sometimes I create really without intention for something like that, Elf on the Shelf. And then sometimes there are these bigger creations that are very intentional, like very like um defined or very goal area oriented. And then sometimes there's a full spectrum of creative endeavors. And so I love that you started that way and then you evolved to untethered, right? And so what came up for you as you shifted from one to the other? Was it difficult, easy?
Well, the impetus for shifting was really that I realized there is a big problem with creativity. And that big problem with creativity is that most people don't even believe they're creative. So I couldn't talk to the people or talk about the topics that I really wanted to talk about because people were like, well, you're talking about creativity. Why are you talking about this?
Yeah.
And that is a problem. People not realizing that they are creative is an inherent problem in our society because you cannot be your absolute sparkly, magical, amazing unicorn best that I love to talk about without admitting first, I am a creative being. I am a creator. I can create and transmute and change and shift and grow. If we don't see that inherently at our core, what we are is creation and what we are creators, then there that we got a problem, which we do have a global problem about that. But I couldn't talk to those people. So I knew that there was something that I needed to shift into. And the idea of untethered actually came during a coaching call. My coach was talking about her daughter was playing tetherball and she was just like kicking it in this. She was kicking the tetherball in the most untethered way. She was just being herself in this just really cool. She was just fully herself. And she's like, she wasn't playing tetherball correctly. She was just wildly. And she's like, that's the person who she is. And I was like, that's it. It's getting back down to what is that version of you? What is you? Like, what is the way that you kick the tetherball? What is the way that you're not even supposed to kick a tetherball, right? I don't even know how to play tetherball. I think it's like a hand situation.
I don't
But
know. I'm just picturing it. I'm like hand, foot, I don't know.
so it's untethering from all the things that we thought, creativity included. What does it mean to
Yeah.
be creative?
Yeah.
Untethering from all the things that you ever thought so that you can come back home to what is it for me? What is this life? What is this world? What is it all for me? And I know this is so esoteric, some of what we're talking
Yeah, some
about,
of it,
but it's
but
also really practical.
yeah. Yeah, can you be esoteric and be practical? I think the answer is yes.
I think so. I always like to say that my like approach to life is farts and philosophy, which I think is practical and esoteric.
I'm so glad you shared that because I am about let's call it 3 or 4 months into my podcast journey, 1 month into episodes being out in the for listeners. And that those shifts in awareness of like, wait a second, we are all artists. It's exactly what you're saying. Like, it's possible that if somebody does not believe that, they won't click. They'll be like, I'm not I'm not an artist. Like, I'm not gonna listen. And it's always been interesting for me. I had a coach one time ask me the question, like, what's your door sign? Like, what will your door sign be? And I thought it was really interesting because currently the door sign is we are all artists, but it's like what you were saying. You're like, but if nobody's opening it, like, because they're like, I'm not an artist, like, no, next. It's like, how do you get people in the door? We keep going back to this door analogy. How do you get them in the door? Because they're like, if I'm not an artist, I don't want to listen to this. But everything that is once they open this We Are All Artists door, all the tools and resources and things to get them to their essence are there. And the whole thing is like your essence, like you said, the magical unicorn, fantastic thing. It's the untethering day by day, breath by breath to get to the essence and then feel like you can make something beautiful, whether that's your pancakes or whether that's your music or your life. And it becomes like a micro and a macro
Yeah.
movement. So yeah, I'm just kind of marinating in that as we speak of like what's the door sign if people kind of don't open because like we don't think we're artists or we don't think
Yeah.
we're creative. It's tough.
It is tough because what I want people to see is that they are brilliant. You are brilliant. Everybody is brilliant. And once we really start to feel our actual brilliance, it's undeniable. But most of us are working from what we think that brilliance actually is. My goal is for more and more people, hundreds of thousands of millions of people, to get to the end of their life and say, that was fucking brilliant. You dropped an F-bomb, so I know I can.
Yeah, I know. I was like, we'll
Like,
just put mark it explicit.
that's my goal, right? Like that's the goal. But we can't tell people something. This is one to take to the bank. And it's for me to think about too, all of us who have something that we're like, I have this message that I really care about. So for any of your listeners who are like, you're entrepreneurs, or you want to be entrepreneurs, or you have just some calling on your heart, and for some reason you're like saying it and nobody's listening and you're so frustrated, we cannot tell people something that they don't already know. You can't tell anybody something that they don't already know. You can get them slightly curious about it, maybe. If you're selling something, you want people to listen to your podcast, you want people to buy your product, we've got to confirm a knowing that they already have inherently in their mind. There's something that they already know about themselves. And maybe they're not saying it out loud, but they already know it. So when we talk about this idea of artists, it is so fascinating because do people already know that they're artists? Do they already know that they're creative? It raises all of these questions, and it all depends on the goal and where you end up taking your podcast and all of those things. And not speaking specifically to that, but also, talking about that. It's like, we have to just think about like, what is the message that I really care about? We find that by continuing to move forward, having this conversation with me, having more conversations with other people. The mind can't figure that out all at once. We have to have more experiences. And so you're doing like this amazing magical thing of moving forward with the thing that's helping you to like shift and change and move and groove. And now you've got all these new onion petals flying around.
And a lot more awareness that a lot of the things I've heard mentors or coaches say over the years, like now that the podcast is out, like in certain instances, I can now be like, oh, like they were right. Like the action creates the clarity, because the more episodes I do, and for an entrepreneur or for somebody else, it would be like the more steps you take, the more I can refine and be like, oh, that's not landing. Or, oh, that really resonates. Or, oh, I'm getting feedback on this. And at the same time, this is something that I've also been thinking about in terms of, or if I take the artistry conversation a little further, is the like, you're also creating for yourself. So I personally have to be like really cognizant of being like, oh, that got the most downloads, I'm going to create more of that. It's like, no, 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 no. Like we still create from what's inspired, not like I saw the numbers did well, so I'm just going to like double down on that. And that's like a balancing act too, though. Cause right. You want to build an audience, and you want an audience that you want to give the audience what they need, right? Once they say, hey, I need this. And you also want to respect, like, that's something I can or cannot, expand upon. And then also knowing when, as an artist, as a creative, as an entrepreneur, as a coach, like when it's time to take the next step in your evolution. So like, when is the next time to get a certificate or a training or a thing? And when do you like not, when is that irrelevant? Because I know throughout throughout Kathy Heller's podcast course, like there were definitely a few conversations about your life experience sometimes being more important than like, oh, I got a certificate saying I can do breath work. It's like that, and it's like a yes and conversation, or a both and conversation, I would say.
Yeah, I want to talk about this certificate thing because I have a possibly polarizing, very strong point of view on that. And I would like to say what you were talking about, this dance of giving people what they want and also following what is true to you. Yeah. That's so important. And as long as we're asking those questions, then you're doing it well when we're asking that question. And can it be both? I think Taylor Swift is the perfect example of both. She is giving people what they need, and she's being fully herself, and she's having so much fun doing it. So that's why people love her, because she's doing all of that wrapped into one. Or you can, for some reason, probably because I was a huge Hanson fan when I was growing up, Hanson comes to mind because they still play MBop. They know that everybody wants to hear the freaking MBop song, but they have continued to explore their artistry. They're actually incredibly talented musicians who still play out all the time because they love it. and they still play bop because they know that that's what people want to hear. They're still going to play it but they're going to play a few of their songs too and have some fun up there. So I think it's both. And that's a dance of finding that balance. Okay. Now let's talk about certifications.
Let's do it.
Do not get a certification. Do not go to get some kind of training, period, unless you are incredibly curious. You are vivaciously curious to learn that thing. There is something inside of you that's like, I really want to learn that. I just really want to learn that. Maybe you don't even know why you want to learn it. Maybe you can't even justify the cost. You can't justify the reason. You can't fully justify it to yourself, but you're so freaking curious. Get that certification. Go do it. If it's called to you, it showed up for you, and you're so interested. That was me with breathwork. No reason to do that. That was not my path. I was not like, I'm going to be a healer. Yes, I'm going to go make money building a breathwork business. No, it showed up for me, and I knew. When something shows up for you and get that certification. Otherwise, no. Do not just go get a certification to get a certification because it's going to prove something to somebody. You've already got what you need. We have so much of what we need already inside of us. I truly prescribe to that. So start giving it to the world. You don't have to get the certification first to start offering it. Unless maybe if you want to, carve out people's organs or something.
When we talk about medical and scientific research and stuff, different. We're talking more healing arts type conversation. And to your point on that, I would say I'm coming to a similar conclusion, but about what sorts of programs I invest in, which is irrelevant. You don't necessarily get a certificate from a program, but it's about where's it coming from exactly. What showed up, what is showing up currently for you in your life of what's showing up and that you're, you said, curious about, but not just curious about, you were extra curious.
Extra curious. Can I give an example of our conversation and us connecting?
Yeah.
You're curious about podcasting.
Yes.
It was obvious. It was obvious that you're curious about podcasting, and you were, you really wanted to know, and you were called to this collective of people, and you were like, oh man, I'm really loving this vibe and this conversation and what's being offered here. This feels like the right space. And you said yes. And it was aligned.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was after many moments. I think this podcast was probably one of the first and more recent times where I was actually this is what it feels like to be aligned. Because before I had a lot of, I thought mentally oh, this is aligned because I want to do it, but it was a lot of I think fear or shame-based. We talked about shame-based in the beginning, or I need this before I can do a podcast. And with the podcasting, it was let's go. We're on this journey together. And I think that was a big part of the movement for me, was somebody saying, let's go. I'm taking you with me. And I was like, let's do it. I was so motivated. And I didn't need, after that, it was the motivation that's a big thing too. The motivation was sustained. If you just go get a certification to get it, I would have to guess that you might lose interest after a while, or it might, right? If you go get a certification just for proof or whatever, it's not going to satisfy you.
No, because then you're just going to get the proving. You're going to prove to everybody that you could do it. But that was the motivation was coming from a different place. And I think too, anybody can start a podcast. You could have started a podcast without that course.
Yes.
But what did you gain from that course that was unexpected? Are there things that you have gained that have been unexpected things that you have learned or felt or grown into?
I think it was one of those things that I actually wanted to buy it earlier in the year because there is a digital version you can buy. And I even reached out and was like, can I do this? I know you only offer it at different times of the year, but do you have it available for me to buy now? And they're like, yeah. And I didn't buy it. I was like, for some reason, it's I'm not buying it this way. And then I don't know if it was a sponsored ad or if I just saw a story. And the reason I'm starting at this point in the process is, one, I won a prize So I won a prize before it started during the week of the challenge. And the reason this was important to me was because I learned what it felt like to receive, and like to receive in a way that was so incredible in terms of like I didn't have to do anything. It was just, if that makes sense, like there was this big lesson and like I got to receive something and I was like, wow, this community is like really, really powerful. And I haven't even purchased the course yet. Like I just was like, this is like an energy I've not experienced in the best way possible. And then the other learnings, I think a lot of it was I didn't even really know, other than the podcast, like what was going to come up. And there was so much support weaved throughout at every turn. It was like how to make an offer, how to start selling. Like for me, one of the bigger ones was kind of like, this is why you're not making money yet. There's a lot of conversations about like, this is why you're not making money yet. Cause like you're not selling. Like you're like, it was actually like that simple. It's one of
Yeah.
those ones that you're like, ooh, that hurt a little bit to hear
Yeah,
that.
but we're not taught how to, and we're taught to sell in all kinds of ways that don't feel good. And so that's how we think that it needs to be done. I got goosebumps from head to toe when you talked
Okay.
about that receiving.
Oh my
That
God.
was, I mean, it was obviously your aligned journey to get to have that experience so
Yeah.
that then you said yes to something that was going to help you grow in
Right.
ways that you didn't even fully realize, to learn things that you didn't know you needed to learn. And you just got to have so many new cool experiences by saying yes to it.
Yeah. And I think just for those listening, like just really take stock of, I know it's different depending on your human design and your makeup and in terms of what a yes and a no might feel like for folks. So that's definitely something that I personally would say take it with a grain of salt about what's a yes and a no for the audience. But I don't know if you've had that experience. I've had to really learn what it meant for me, a yes and a no, because it was not black and white. Like it was like very different in terms of, was it a body sensation? Was it did I get, kind of clouded mind? Like, did I feel a visceral that like I had to really start to break down slowly. Let's go back to the slow. And sometimes I got it wrong. Sometimes I got it wrong. But it then gave me data of what was it actually a yes going forward. Maybe that would be a helpful way for us to kind of wrap up the conversation, is like when people are going on this journey and they so desperately want to have like a community, they want to heal, they want to be supported. It's finding the right person. Like Kathy was like, I'm not going to be the right person for all of you. And I'm so glad she also said that, because like not everybody says that. Not everybody says that. And so when she said that, I was like, she's so real. Like, it's right. Not everybody's going to be for you. Um, Are there ways that you make those decisions in your life about yes and no, or that you might say to somebody that wants to work with you?
Yeah, I have a very specific decision-making process that I
Okay,
teach to my clients, which is
cool.
kind of different, and I'll share it with all of you. There may definitely be something for you in
Yeah.
this. And it's all part of learning to trust yourself and the information that you are getting, because we are taught, and this goes back to the tethers, we are taught to look for outside information. We're very trained at it. You do not need to flex that muscle anymore, most of us, unless you're a sociopath. Like you don't need to flex the outside information muscle. We need
Right.
to learn to flex the inside information muscle. So when you have a decision, we're just going to say tonight, do I want pizza
Yeah.
or tacos?
Great. It's a hard
Flip
decision sometimes. So.
put heads is pizza, tails is tacos. You flip the coin and it lands on heads. And that's pizza. How do you feel about pizza right now? Now that it has chosen, the decision's been made. How do you feel about it?
I'm actually like, I'm not completely convinced. I'm like,
That's information. You've just gained new information. Maybe that's not something that feels really good. Can I ask a different question? Can I ask a different question? Do I feel like eating out tonight? And we ask a different question, then we see what we feel. Oh, crap. I think I actually just wanted to eat inside. I just wanted to stay home. I didn't even want to go out and get pizza or tacos. So it's this flip the coin, make a decision, make the decision. Just make a decision. It doesn't matter. There are no right and wrong decisions. One of the most powerful things I've ever learned. There's no good and bad decision. There are simply decisions. They are completely neutral. The decision itself is neutral. It's the information that you receive after the decision is made that really matters. And the most important information is how you feel, which is usually what we completely ignore. We just look to the outside. We say, okay, what's the result of that decision? But we don't look at the inner result and how we feel about the decision that was made. Because 99% of the time, now there are some, when we're talking about like life or death decisions, that is slightly different, but we make thousands of decisions every single day. And if we can start making more of those decisions from a place of, I'm just going to make the decision and then I'm going to see how I feel, that will change everything for you. Absolutely everything changes when you start, make the decision. How do I feel? Make another decision. How do I feel? And we move forward from that space.
So going to your example of the heads pizza, tails tacos, if we flip the coin, it's pizza. I'm all of a sudden like, meh, pizza's like not that great. Then you said the next step in that kind of mental process is ask a different question.
Yes.
Of like,
ask another question, ask a more clarifying question, or you could have been like, actually, I did want tacos. Like it's pretty obvious.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
It could have just been that you actually wanted the other thing and you needed some physical feeling clarity for yourself. So I skipped that part, but yes, it's gain clarity in that situation. Like, what was that? There was a feeling there. What might that mean for me? Then if it's like, okay, I don't want tacos and I kind of feel neutral about pizza. Well, what might it be like if I didn't get pizza at all and I stayed home? And we can just start unraveling the question into new questions. It helps you ask a better question, which is really like money in this world.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. As you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, this would be helpful for anyone making a decision and just knowing that it creates clarity. The action creates the clarity, the action of flipping the coin, the action of whatever the action is. And it's so interesting because that just full circle, it's like the journey that we've been talking about this past hour is really the journey back to self, right? And like every time you ask the question, you get better at asking questions. And like I feel like it's really powerful to become a good question asker. Like as you're saying.
It is.
Because then that's where the transformation comes through. And also knowing that, I think the thing that I always got tripped up on was feeling like that decision had to be forever. Like if we were doing pizza and tacos, heads and tails, that I'd be like, oh man, I'm gonna have to eat pizza for the week now. Like I don't want that. Where it's like, it's just for that meal. Or like literally you could eat it and decide you never want it again. Like, but not putting so much weight into it. The neutrality. So I was talking about this, the neutrality that you speak of.
Yes. And this comes from a space of me being one of those people who I would order my food at a restaurant and then sit there for the next 20 minutes before the food came thinking, did I get the wrong thing? Should I have gotten the enchiladas? I ordered the taco and I don't really even like tacos. Oh my gosh, what if I would sit there and just, so I get it. I once spent like 4 weeks straight researching air fryers only to finally get the air fryer and not like the air fryer that I had spent so much time researching. I get it. I get it. And this new way of making decisions and feeling the decision that you make, it's do a yes or no, feel the response, move forward from there, ask a better question. It changed my life. And I believe it could change so many people's lives.
I love it. I'm literally, when we hang up, I'm going to do that.
Start with a yes or no. Start with a yes or no. Your questions after that initial yes or no can be yeses or nos, or they can be more obscure questions, because at least you've got a little bit of information to go off of, if that makes sense. And it does, you mentioned human design. This can depend too on your response and those sorts of things. If you're really into human design, I'm a generator. So this works incredibly well for both manifesting generators and generators. If you're a reflector, you might have a different decision-making process that works best for you.
Yeah. This might be a dumb question, but if you know it, is every generator a sacral authority, or is that not?
I actually don't think that
I don't-
I know that might not be true either. I don't know that much about human design.
Okay.
So I know about myself.
Yes. Same.
And most of my clients tend to be kind of aligned in that direction too. But you can shift this process too into what works for you. The important thing is going inward after you make a decision. And most of the time we go outward. So it's flipping that.
As you said that, I'm like light bulbs. I'm like, yeah, you make the decision, then you go to like, I don't know, whoever is around and you're like, do you like that decision? And then when they say something, then you're like, oh crap. Like imagine that restaurant example you gave about the enchiladas. Like imagine if you were with like 4 friends and you're like, I really should have maybe the enchiladas would have been better. And then all
I
of
don't
them are like,
freaking
yeah, they're
know.
so, or if they were like, yeah, they're so good. I always think about that because like if you have a waiter that tells you everything is good, sometimes I question that a little bit because I'm like, some restaurants, let's just say maybe some restaurants truly everything's good, but I can't imagine that they absolutely adore every single item on the menu, like, so it's like, you have to know that only you know yourself the best, but that it's so powerful because yes, I think at least I can speak for myself, tendency to make the decision, knee-jerk reaction, go tell somebody the decision I made and then be like, what do you think? And then the minute they say something that's like not what I wanted, then you start to question and doubt and like all the things.
Yeah, the feedback, going and getting feedback from others is later in the process. It's okay to go get feedback on our decisions, but every CEO of any company ever, anybody who has ever made it to that level, they are strong in their knowing that their decision was the aligned decision. And then they go and they tell the employees and they tell the leaders and then they get their feedback. But you've got to be firm in your own aligned belief in whatever choice you've made. And then you move forward. And what that waiter knows, waiters know this, the waiter who says, well, everything is good, they know that what they say doesn't freaking matter because you have different taste buds than they have and you have different experiences and you like different things. So all they're saying with everything is good is, I can't tell you what to get. You need to just decide what sounds good to you.
And like, I need to go to the next table. Like, hurry.
Also that.
So I'm glad that we can sort of summarize the conversation. There is like being firm in your inner knowing. That's such a great place to kind of wrap it up, is like all of these things that we're doing is to become more solid in our inner knowing
Yes.
of the path.
Less of the external, untether from the external, come back home to the internal.
Yeah. Which I love. So thank you so much for coming on today. And I'd love to know, how can folks work with you at the moment?
Yeah. So I have a breathwork membership that's called Brilliant Breathwork, and you can find all about that at jenliss.com/join. You can also join a single session as well if you don't want to join the full membership, if you just want to sample out some breathwork. And I've also got a podcast called Untethered with Jen Liss.
I love it. Thank you so much. I had such a good time talking to you about this stuff, and I'm definitely gonna go like for a walk and just let it all sink in.
Sounds good. That's also a practice that I highly recommend after downloading a ton of information. Go for a walk, go get outside.
Okay. Talk to you soon, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you learned something new and embrace being the student of your own life until the time we meet again. If you'd like a way to support the show and to hear more of this content, I would be so grateful if you leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts and take a moment to hit the subscribe or follow button so that you get notified of new episodes. I'd love to stay connected with you on Instagram at weareallartists with 3 L's. I can't wait to get a DM from you hearing what you loved and what topics you desire to hear more of. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. I'll talk to you soon. This podcast is for entertainment and general informational purposes only. I am not a licensed healthcare professional, and this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician or other qualified professional.